Well, hey, everybody. It is so good to have you here. So grateful to have all of you here in the room. Those of you who are joining us via our online campus, so glad that you are here as well. My name is Jamie, and I am one of the pastors here. So today means we are 1 week closer to the conclusion of our series, Starting Point. We're going to be wrapping that up next week. And I hope it's been a good series for you, that you've learned a lot, that it's stretched you, that it's grown your faith. The whole idea of this series is basically, rediscovering what our faith is, what it is based upon. And because for most of us, the starting point for our faith, it kind of happened to us. It wasn't something it didn't happen in a world religions class where we, heard all the options and picked the one that made the most sense to us or that appealed to us the most. For most of us anyway, when we were young, our parents just kind of said to us, this is what we believe. And so you just kind of believed it. And then maybe they sent you to Sunday school, and the teacher in that class, they taught the same things that your parents were telling you, and so you believed a little bit more. And then maybe they sent you to Christian school, or they sent you to youth group or Christian camp or something like that, and you heard more about what it was that you believed, and so you believed a little bit more, and that's really kind of how the starting point happened for most of us. The problem comes, though, when we got a little bit older, we started encountering some headwinds that made it a little bit difficult for us to believe. We started to experience some things that did not line up with those things that we had been told about God and faith and the Bible. And so when our experiences were not lining up, it kind of gave us some pause, and we started to reconsider some of the things that we believed. And then maybe you went off to college and you encountered some ideas about the world and about the Bible, things that you'd never really heard before, things that honestly, they made a lot of sense, and they made some of the things that you were handed when you were a kid seem naive or maybe not true. And when that happens, what is occurring is a lot of people, when they encounter that, their experiences aren't lining up with what they were told, or they learn some things that don't really line up with what they were told, you grow very discouraged in your faith. And some of you sitting right here, that may describe you. And then there are others who just walk away altogether. I mean, they just determine, well, those things that I was told that we believe just aren't believable. They're not true. And so people have kind of walked away. So in this series, what we've been doing is trying to figure out, how do we find an adult starting point to our faith? How do we reboot our faith? How do we do a restart to our faith, and not necessarily like get rid of those things that we were taught when we were younger, but maybe look at them from a different perspective, a perspective that takes into account some of these other things that we've kind of learned. And if you're just now joining us, I would encourage you, because this series kind of builds 1 week after the other, I would encourage you to go to our YouTube channel or into the Believers Church app and watch some of the messages that you have missed, so that you can kind of track with me. Today, I want to talk to you about something that I haven't really talked about yet in this series, even though this entire series is about it, and that is, I want to talk to you about faith or belief. And if you want to restart your faith, then you kind of need to know what faith is. And since we're looking for an adult starting point to our faith, I don't want to just, kind of read you the Bible definition of faith. It's the evidence of things unseen or whatever. You can read that for yourself sometime. But today what I want to do is I want to look at belief or faith from a much broader perspective. And I'm going to use those two words kind of interchangeably, belief and faith, because they're both basically the same thing. So I'm going to use those kind of interchangeably. And I want to give you kind of three big general observations about belief, because if we're going to restart our faith, our belief, we need to understand this concept. It's a really important thing to try to wrap our minds around. So here's the first observation. If you're taking notes, and I hope that you will, you can do that in the Believers Church app. There's some fill-ins here. Here's the first general observation about belief. The ability to believe is the most powerful force at humankind's disposal. The ability to believe is the most powerful force at humankind's disposal. You think about it, like most creatures, they operate on instinct, but humankind, we operate on belief. Everything that you see is there because someone believed that it was possible, and they went about achieving it. So I'll give you just a few examples of what I mean by this. Like here locally, we have, I think, a pretty, when I say this, there's going to be a kind of a collective moan because you hate it, but it's still pretty amazing. Our transportation system here in Hampton Roads is pretty incredible. And I know you get stuck in traffic all the time and you hate it, but think about it. It's pretty amazing. So like years ago, a long time ago, the best way to cross waterways was a boat, a ferry, and people would load their stuff and themselves on a ferry and they would cross the water, and that was the best way to do it. And then eventually, you'd moved your horse and buggy, and now you can move your car, and you use a ferry to kind of do all that kind of stuff. But then someone said, you know what? I believe we could do better. We could have bridges, but we have to have bridges that still allow ships to kind of come through. And so there's a bunch of drawbridges around here, and they're a pain when they're up, but it is still pretty amazing. And then someone said, you know what? I bet you we could do better than going over the water. We could go under the water. And someone believed that was possible, and so they engineered tunnels. I mean, think about that. That's just so incredible. There's one being built right now, and I find that to be amazing. Someone believed that it was possible, and now they're kind of executing. And then someone had this crazy idea. I bet you we could attach the eastern shore with the mainland through a series of bridges and tunnels. And then they went about building it, all because they believed it was possible. I mean, that's really pretty incredible. Of course, it's not just roadways. We're kind of hopefully, on the tail end, we hope, of this global pandemic. And when it all started, you think about it, it was, about a year ago, when it all started, governments and pharmaceutical companies, they went into full swing to develop vaccinations that could vaccinate the most vulnerable in our population to start. And I had several conversations already this morning with folks who've gotten their vaccination. You think about that. Like, that happened because someone believed it was possible. And there were 4 different companies, I think it's 4, 3 American, but there's another one in Europe, that developed vaccinations to try to help overcome this pandemic. And it is literally changing the world, all because someone believed that it was possible. And of course, that belief was based on other vaccinations that made it possible to all but eradicate a handful of diseases from the planet. And it all started because someone believed that would be possible. So you think about it. Every idea, every innovation in our society that has been a problem that has been overcome, it all started with an idea. Someone just believed that it could happen. And then other people started talking about it, and other people started believing, and then they kind of organized around it or raised money around it, and then they started executing the idea, and amazing things have happened, all because people believe. Jesus said this. He said, I tell you the truth, if you had faith, if you had belief, even as small as a mustard seed, you could say to this mountain, move from here to there, and it would move. Nothing would be impossible. Just a little belief, Jesus says. Very powerful. Some people get all hung up on that passage. It's like, is Jesus being literal? I mean, we've all seen mountains moved, right? Because of belief. I mean, we just talked about, in the medical world, we've seen mountains moved. The mountain of slavery, which was a global scourge, that mountain was moved. How was it moved? Because someone believed that it was wrong, and they started speaking out against it. And then others kind of joined the chorus and said, yeah, this is wrong. This must end. And then an anti-slavery movement was formed. And then eventually the mountain of slavery was moved, all because of belief. Behind every incredible thing that we've done, behind every terrible thing that has been done, there was an idea that started that, a belief in something. Ideologies, which are just belief systems, they direct world events. They're all based on belief. And those beliefs are kind of like a weapon. You point them somewhere and change starts to happen. And sometimes it's extraordinarily disruptive. I mean, you know how America got started. There were a bunch of people who believed that we should not be under the thumb of the British Empire. And so people started talking about it, and then other people believed it, and then they started organizing around it. Then they started acting on that belief, and it wasn't long before a revolution was started, and a nation was born because someone believed that it was possible. And when you watch the news and you see, international conflicts or even conflicts within a nation, what you are seeing is the result of belief systems that are opposed to one another. So someone will say, well, I believe this and this is important. And someone else will say, well, that's really dumb. I don't think you should believe that. You should believe this. And then they organize around those things, and then wars break out and terrorist activities are launched and communities are torn apart, all around belief. When someone believes something is possible, they will look for a way to do it until they finally accomplish it. Elon Musk, he believes that we will be a multi-planetary civilization, shifting between Earth, Moon, and Mars. Now, I don't know if that's going to happen in my lifetime, but I will say this. It wasn't that long ago that the idea of a spacecraft landing on Mars and sending images to Earth would have been a ridiculous idea. But someone believed that it was possible. And they organized around that, and they researched around it, and then they started executing and acting on that belief. That's pretty incredible. Elon Musk, he says this. He says, you want to wake up in the mornings and think the future is going to be great. And that's what being a spacefaring civilization is all about. It's about believing. Isn't that interesting? It's about believing in the future and thinking that the future will be better than the past. And I can't think of anything more exciting than going out there and being among the stars. That's the power of belief. It's our most powerful force. From belief, all of these great things happen. We try again, we anticipate, hope, imagine, create, improve. All of these things flow from belief. It is a very powerful force. Not religious belief, just belief. Very, very powerful. Second general observation about belief, and it is this: we constantly look for evidence to support what we believe to be true. We do this all the time. We are constantly looking, maybe not even consciously, but we are constantly looking for others who will reinforce what we believe. We're constantly looking for evidence to reassure ourselves that what we believe is true. And this is especially true of Republicans and Democrats and independents. I mean, it's true of all of us. It's true of every single one of us. We're constantly looking for those things that will reinforce what we believe. And we kind of screen out any of those things that would disagree with what we believe. So we'll Google something. You've done this. I know I have. You'll Google something, and then you start wading through all of the articles that come up on your Google search. And what do? You write off the ones that don't agree with you. Like, oh, that guy's an idiot. That guy's a nut job. He doesn't even know what he's talking about. And you just keep doing that until you find the article, the brilliant article that was written by the person who agrees with you. That's what you do. And we all do this. We watch our news based on the idea that the news we watch is going to tell us what we already believe. We do that. And I hear people say, I could never believe anything that comes on Fox News. I mean, just right-wing extremists, all of it. And then there are others who scroll right by CNN. Why? Fake news, right? That's why. And we all do this. It's not just the other side. You do it too. And why do you do it? It's because you're looking for information that will reinforce what it is that you already believe. And this is just how belief works. And it's what makes belief so powerful. And it makes it kind of dangerous. Because we land on something that we believe. We look for evidence to reinforce what we believe. We screen out anything that contradicts what we believe. And it doesn't matter what the topic is that we're talking about. This is what we do. Whether it's educating your kids, vaccinating your kids, whether it's your approach to business or religion, you believe something, you look for something to reinforce what you believe. You kind of weed out that stuff that might cause you to question some of what you believe. And this is how conspiracy theories work. You believe something, and it may be kind of out there, but you believe it. And today, it's easier than ever to find some other people who believe what you believe, and then you start sharing some of the evidence that you have for what it is that you believe, and you leave out all the stuff that might contradict what you believe. And then, here's the crazy thing: this happens with conspiracy theories of all kinds. Then you start seeing what it is that you believe. It becomes like this self-fulfilling idea. Third general observation about belief, and that is, belief is easy to maintain within a community of shared belief. This explains an awful lot, and here's why this is true. In a community where everyone shares the same belief system, not only are you allowing information in that will reinforce what you believe, not only are you kind of screening out information that might be contrary to what you believe, but if you start to waver in your belief and you start to question some of what you've been told, you will be surrounded by 10 other people in the community who will say, you're right, they're wrong, here's why. And they'll talk to you until you kind of settle down and get back in line. That's what happens. This happens nationally. Countries think differently than others. There are sororities that have different values, and they have a community, a very strong community around that will support that and reinforce that through their community. And this is why we have so many different religions. And within Christianity, it's why there are so many different denominations, because you get a community of people together who all believe the same thing, and they're filtering out bad information and letting in good information. Then it's easy to perpetuate a belief system when that is what you are doing. So that's the basics of belief. And now what I want to do is I want to kind of transition from belief and transition over to religious belief, because that's really what this series is all about. So religious belief is just belief applied to things of a religious nature. That's what religious belief is. And you might think I'm oversimplifying it, but I don't think I am. You can disagree with me, but I think this is pretty accurate. Religious belief is really just belief about religious things. That's what religious belief is. So, belief, and hear me on this, because there's a lot out there that's kind of wrong around this. Belief is not like a superpower. You know, it's not a magical thing. So religious belief is powerful, but it's powerful really because belief is powerful. And that's what makes religious belief so powerful, because belief is. So belief, you know, it splits worlds, it splits families, it creates nations, it solves problems, it causes people to slaughter each other, it causes other people to build hospitals. I mean, belief is this powerful, powerful thing. And religious belief is powerful because belief is powerful. And all religious belief is based on this very simple phrase. It's a powerful phrase, but it's very simple. And it's this phrase here: believe that. I believe that. Jews believe that Abraham is the father of their nation and that God promised to bless the nations that flowed from Abraham, and the Jewish nation is that nation. Muslims believe that Muhammad is a prophet who heard from God, and Ishmael is the child of promise from Abraham's seed, and that their nations will be blessed because of God's promise through Ishmael. And for centuries, for millennia really, those two belief systems have been in conflict with one another because they each believe that, and what they believe is opposed to what the other one believes. Christians believe that Jesus is the Son of God, that he came and he died on a cross to pay for our sins. But here's the thing, and you might find this kind of disturbing, but it's true, and it's true because of the three observations that we've looked at about general belief. And that is, whatever you believe, whatever religious system that you kind of embrace and believe, and you believe it deeply enough, eventually, if you do that, believe it deeply enough and surround yourself with a community of other people who believe, it will become a self-fulfilling prophecy. It does. That's true. You get enough people believing in something, looking for things to back up what they believe, screaming out anything that doesn't kind of line up with what they believe, and you give someone a microphone who can stand up in front of other people and they can explain things kind of persuasively, and you've got a religious experience, because that's really kind of what it is. And you'll see miracles and you'll see answers to prayer. You will because you believe that you will. And what happens when God doesn't answer your prayer? Well, you come up with reasons to justify why the things that you believe are not actually happening. So you'll say things like, well, I didn't have enough belief. I didn't have enough faith. That's why God didn't answer that prayer. Well, how do you know when you have enough faith? When is enough belief enough? Or you'll say, probably had some sin in my life, that's why God didn't answer that prayer. Well, that's a pretty good guess. You always have sin in your life. What are we doing? We're coming up with excuses to justify why the things that we say we believe are not happening, because we'd rather do that than change what we believe. So that's religious belief or faith in a nutshell. So what do we do with all of this? That's a good question. Those three general observations are true, and the result is here's the options pretty much that you have based on that. One is you could just conclude that religion is a psychosis, and there's a lot of people out there who've written about that, and that is exactly the conclusion that they have drawn. Religion is just it's just a bunch of people who all believe the same thing, and they have a shared belief in that particular community. They're allowing information in that reinforces. They're keeping out information that contradicts. They have a community kind of enforcement around it, and you get enough people together who are maybe a little bit naive or afraid of death, or they need answers to things that they don't really understand, and that's all religion is. It's just a psychosis, a sickness, and so that's one thing, and we'll just leave the crazies over there to do their religious thing. And that's a growing thought in our culture today. that that's exactly what religion is. Or you could say, well, that may be true, but belief is powerful, and religious belief is powerful, so I'm just going to pick a religious belief, and I'm going to throw myself at it, and I'm going to try to develop that belief. And it doesn't even really matter what the belief is. You've seen the studies. Religious people tend to be happier. Their relationships tend to be better. Religious people tend to live longer. You've heard all of that. And it's true. So it doesn't really matter what the religious belief system is. You just need to, throw yourself in a community of other people who believe the same thing. And if you believe it long enough, eventually it will become true for you. And there's a lot of people in our culture that's where they are. Yeah, it doesn't really matter what you believe. Just believe something and be sincere. So those are kind of the options that you have. Bottom line, and then we'll just kind of close in prayer. The bottom line is this: don't stop believing. Hold on to it. Hold on to that feeling, right? So, if all of this is true, then why are we here today? Have you thought about that? If all of this is true, then why are we here? If we're going to have a new starting point for our faith, you need to wrestle with some of this stuff. It's good to wrestle with. But there's something very unique about the belief system of Christianity. Something very unique. And it's important to understand. So, when Jesus died, those who were closest to him believed that, there's that phrase, they believed that Jesus was dead. That's what they believed. They believed, those who knew Jesus best, those who would later bring us the story of Jesus, they believed that when Jesus died, that was that he was dead, and that was going to be the end of it. So after all of the teachings, all of the miracles, all of the parables, all of the things that Jesus said that kind of tripped up the religious leaders of the day and made them all angry, at the end of the day, when it was all said and done, Jesus died, and all of those things kind of became irrelevant because Jesus was dead. They also believed that Jesus was a powerful speaker whose powerful speaking got him crucified. You could have asked any one of Jesus' companions what they thought, and they would have all said some version of the same thing. Yeah, Jesus was amazing, and the things that he taught were incredible. No one had ever taught with so much authority before, but he didn't really know when to dial it back. And so, it ended up costing him, and he ended up getting killed for it. They also believed that he was not the Son of God. That's what they believed. There was a time where Jesus said to Peter, Jesus asked, who do people say that I am? And Peter responded and said, you are the Son of God. And Jesus said to him, oh man, that's brilliant, really good insight, Peter. God gave you that ability to see that I was more than just a person. I was the Son of God. But if you were to have asked Peter after the crucifixion what he thought of Jesus, he would have said, well, I did believe that he was the Son of God, but obviously I was wrong because he died, and gods don't die. They also believed that he was not the Messiah. Now, prior to the crucifixion, everyone around Jesus thought he was pretty unique and pretty special, and that he probably was the Messiah. They felt like they were on the verge of something incredible taking place. They all believed that. But then after the crucifixion, no one really believed at that point. Messiahs don't die. Messiahs set nations free and people free. And you can't do that when you're dead. That's just not how it works. And they also believed that their lives were in danger You think about that, when most religious systems, people who are like at the forefront of a religious movement, when they die, their followers will kind of make them a martyr, and then they will kind of rally around the martyr death of the one, and they will, gather the teachings, and they will perpetuate the teachings of that person to kind of keep the movement going, but not Christianity. Those who were around Jesus, when Jesus was arrested and they kind of scattered, they scattered because they knew that they too were enemies of the state. And they were afraid that they were going to be next. So they were terrified. They ran. They went into hiding because they believed that their lives were in danger. They believed that Jesus was not at all who he claimed to be. Because Jesus, one of the things that's pretty unique about Jesus is he made the movement all about himself. And he made a lot of claims about himself. He said that he was the way, the truth, and the life, and that no one could come to the Father apart from him. He said that if anyone had seen him, they had seen the Father, making himself equal with God. He forgave, or at least he said he did, he forgave people's sins. Only God could forgive sins, and yet Jesus, on multiple occasions, said to people, your sins are forgiven. But when Jesus died, like all of that might have been plausible before he died, but then after he died, none of it seemed plausible anymore. So the disciples, they scattered when he was arrested. Some saw him crucified. They heard that he was laid in a tomb. Those claims about Jesus were no longer valid options, really. And they weren't going to continue teaching what Jesus said because, why would they? What he said was obviously not true. In fact, Jesus' closest followers lost faith in the end. And the reason they lost faith in the end is because they believed it was the end. When Jesus died and they laid him in a tomb, that was the end. But of course, we're here. So it wasn't the end. So what happened? That's where it gets really kind of interesting, because something happened. And what happened was a few days later, these same disciples who scattered and ran when Jesus was arrested, not 100 years later, not 50 years later, not 3 years later, just a few days later, they went out into the streets of Jerusalem, the very streets where Jesus was arrested and where the crucifixion happened, and they went into the streets and they started to preach about Jesus. And what's really interesting, and you can go back to the book of Acts and read about what the disciples preached, but one of the things that's really interesting about what they taught is what they did not teach. There's no record at all that the disciples went out there into the streets of Jerusalem and said, okay, listen, there's this guy, this dad, and he has 2 sons, and one of the sons asked for his inheritance a little bit early. Now, that's a great story, the story of the prodigal son, but there's no evidence whatsoever that the disciples went out and taught the parable of the prodigal son. No one stood up and said, blessed are the pure in heart, for they will see the kingdom of heaven. No one said that. What they did is they went into the streets of Jerusalem and they preached the same message. I gave you the outline of that message before, but the outline just had 4 parts to it, and the message was pretty straightforward. The first part of the message was, you killed him. And when they said that, they meant like literally, you who are here that we're talking to, you are responsible for killing him. But then they would say, but God raised him, and we've seen him. Say you're sorry. And they just taught that message over and over and over again. That was it. That was the message. And you remember where we started this series, just 20 years after all of these events that took place in Jerusalem, the Apostle Paul is in Athens, all the way up in Athens, and he's talking to a group of people who don't know anything about Jesus. And he doesn't teach them the Beatitudes, and he doesn't teach them the Lord's Prayer. He doesn't try to convince them that Jesus' teachings were superior to their philosophers. That's not what Paul taught them. In fact, you remember this, we looked at this verse that first week. He gave them proof. And here's what Paul said. He said, God has given proof of all of this? To all of us. How? What is the proof? He raised Jesus from death. That is the proof. And that right there is the key to why we are here today. And that's why you should seriously consider following Jesus. And that's why if you would say, I'm already a follower of Jesus, that is why you should seriously work on finding a new starting point for your faith, one that emboldens you and strengthens you. Because our belief in Jesus is way stronger than we just believe that. It's way better than that. Paul didn't go from antagonist of Jesus to apologist of Jesus because he believed something. Peter, he didn't go from denier of Jesus to declarer of Jesus because he believed in something. James, the brother of Jesus, think about this. The brother of Jesus who didn't even believe in Jesus when he was teaching and doing miracles, and he thought Jesus was crazy when he was crucified. And yet, just a little while later, we meet James, and where is he? He's in Jerusalem leading the church that bears his brother's name. How did that happen? Not because he believed something, but because all of them, it's because they saw something. That's why. They were given proof that Jesus was exactly who he claimed to be. And the proof was that Jesus left the tomb. And they weren't just told about it, and they certainly didn't read it. They saw it for themselves, and it changed everything for them. See, the starting point for the Christian faith is not that we believe something is true and we believe that everyone else is wrong. It's way more than that. We believe that something happened, that Jesus came, and that he died for our sins, and that God raised him from the dead. And if you will believe in him, trust in him, put your faith in him, you will be a child of God. And because of what Jesus did, not because of what Jesus taught, but because of what Jesus did, everything he taught was true. So he loves you. He answers prayer. God will sustain you when life is hard. All of that is true because of what Jesus did. The starting point for our faith is Jesus. Will you trust him? I want to invite you to pray with me as we close out our time together. Father, thank you for loving us. Thank you for what you did for us. Thank you that we don't just have claims of belief to cling to, but that we have proof that we can hang on to. And Father, I pray for anyone who calls themselves a follower of you. And I pray that today their faith has been strengthened. I know there's many who call Jesus Lord who are growing weary in their faith. And my prayer is that you would strengthen them. And Father, if there's anyone who's outside of faith in you, who's in this room or watching online, I pray even now that you would draw them to yourself. And while our heads are bowed and no one's looking around, if that's you, and there's never been a moment where you have declared your belief in Jesus, then I would invite you to pray with me right where you are. And just say, Father, thank you that you loved me enough to send your son Jesus, who came and lived and died to pay for my sins, and then demonstrated his power over my sin and over death by rising to new life. And right now, I place my faith in you. And Father, we're so incredibly grateful that you make it possible for us to come into your presence. In Jesus' name, amen.